I'm a self-confessed personality hire. I've sold wine over the phone, paparazzi photos, ad space, but what I've always been best at is selling myself. I'm Jodie Clarke, a journalist with a knack for flying sideways into rooms that weren't built for me. What a vibe! The Personality Hire is a career-driven series about instinct, charisma, and backing yourself. From non-traditional paths to identity pivots, it's about what happens when you stop trying to fit the mold and start trusting your gut. If you're sitting at your desk knowing that your skill set is being wasted, this podcast is for you. I've been embarrassed, bullied, and fired, but I've also been praised, promoted, and landed my dream job. I've been through it all and want to help others find the courage to land their dream gig. Guys, the reality is the linear career path is dead. So you're going to hear from people who've carved out their own paths. It might be business owners, creators, leaders in their space, the ones who weren't afraid to back themselves. I firmly believe that with a bit of riz, strategy, and determination, you can make anything happen. I'm excited to challenge everything you've been taught about climbing the career ladder, all of the BS we deal with in the corporate world, and how to navigate that. I'm also really keen, particularly as a woman, to get into society's weird conditioning around age and timelines. So let's get into it. The first job I ever had was a checkout chick. I was about 14 years old and I lied about my age to get the job. I was a good checkout chick. Look, I wasn't particularly good at the counting money part. The nuts and bolts, old mate might have got shortchanged a couple of times. But my checkout was the place to be. My aisle was a vibe. And now that I look back at that time, it was evident I was always the personality hire. Now, personality hire refers to the notion of a company hiring someone for their personality, interpersonal skills, or culture fit, as opposed to their technical skills or experience. Personality hires often get a bad rap, like you've got no business being in the room unless you've ticked every technical box. But I reckon some of those so-called soft skills, well, they're the sharpest ones in the building. Also, I bust my ass every day, so I'd like to formally reject the notion that we don't do any work, because that's just simply not true. But look, the reality is I've used my personality to open every door I've walked in. I remember I got a contract as a sales manager for Shazam, and it was a highly competitive role. Shazam as in the global music app. You look after a patch of media agencies, tier 1 and 2 media agencies, big money involved. And the interview process was hectic for that role. I think there was about 4 to 5 rounds. I did a brief response. I did a pitch. I think I did a test. It just went on and on and on. Before I even entered the room, I researched the decision maker, the person I knew was going to get me in that role. And I showed my enthusiasm and passion every time I was in front of them. Each time they saw me, I was looking $1 million. Shout out Timu. The best person on paper didn't get the job that day. I did, because I made sure they remembered me. You don't have to be the best candidate. You just need to show them that you want it the most. I was the most unqualified person in that room, and I still got the job. And I've done this time and time again, because backing yourself isn't a moment. It's a muscle. I'm often asked how I transitioned from C-suite executive assistant to television reporter in under 2 years. And a key turning point for me was quitting advertising and moving into an executive assistant role at a major construction company. And I did that to free up my mental space so that I could create. So I was working full-time as an EA, and I was also co-hosting my first podcast, Good Bitch, which was a very different podcast aimed at millennial women just trying to navigate the ups and downs of life. And we had a blast. We worked on that podcast for, I think, nearly 3 years. But like anything, that chapter ended. And when it did, I started working at a very well-known audio entertainment business. Again in an EA role, but this time it was different because I'd finally inserted myself in the picture. And I was working with people that were super talented, creative. It was an amazing vibe. And I thought to myself, this is what I should be doing. My skill set is being wasted. So I knew I had to carve out a path to get there, but my path had been anything but conventional. Once again, I used my personality to get in the door. I did my research on the executive I was meeting with, so he knew I was serious about the job. I remember sending a LinkedIn message to the CEO's EA at the time, just selling myself. And later down the track, she told me I was the only person out of maybe around 200 candidates that did that, which is crazy to me because LinkedIn is such low-hanging fruit. But again, after a while, I started to get itchy again. Like, I was the one that should be behind the mic. I wanted to be creating. It just felt like I was being wasted. And I remember having a coffee with one of my executives at the time, and he looked me dead in the eye and he's like, Jodie, I know this isn't what you want to be doing. And he was right. I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I knew it was time to really back myself and go for it. I firmly believe that you should always shoot your shot, even if you're underqualified. Before I moved into television, I got a job as a radio reporter. That was in spite of the fact that I'd received negative feedback around my voice and accent, and I just thought, F it, I'm going to do it anyway. When you got nothing to lose. So I made a radio demo. And it has to be said, I was able to make this radio demo at the company I was working for based on the relationships that I had built over time. A producer did it for me free of charge just because he believed in me. And he is an awesome, awesome person. Now, I used that demo to get a job at a talkback radio station full-time, which was huge for me because it finally marked the transition from EA work to full-time broadcast media, actually behind the mic. But this did not come without sacrifice. To go after the dream, I had to halve my pay, like completely cut it in half. And I think people outside of the media industry, and we've heard this a bit lately, but I think people outside of the media industry are under some sort of delusion that we're all on six figures, that we're paid really well, just because there's this sense of sheen around being on TV. They think that, I don't know, it's bizarre. Even when I'm out on jobs, they think that I just rock up and I'm told what to say. No, we're not paid well, and we do everything from top to bottom. You know what I mean? It's just the perception of reporters and presenters, it's far from the truth, I think. A lot of the time anyway. I can only speak to my experience. So I had to have my pay, but I was prepared to make that sacrifice because I was solid on my vision. I knew where I wanted to go and how I had to get there. And quite honestly, at that point, I just didn't care what anyone thought. A lot of people had a lot of different opinions. None of those opinions were going to help me at the end of the day. I had to help me. So after about 6 months working as a radio reporter, I got a job as a news producer on Sunrise, which is a breakfast TV show in Sydney. Now, I rocked up to this interview, again, looking like $1 million, with the mentality that I'm not leaving until they assure me the job. That's how I go into any interview pretty much. I'm not leaving until you've told me I've got the job. That might come across like arrogant, but I just think you really need to have that mentality if you want something. Shoot a shoot, baby, is all I'm saying. So I showed my passion and I applied for that producer job, even though I was underqualified. You know those little role descriptions that they have on LinkedIn? The little, this is what we want to see? They don't matter. Apply anyway. Like, literally, they don't mean anything. It's proven by the fact that I got the job even though I didn't tick all of the boxes they were asking for. And I don't care what anyone says, that job is the hardest job in the 7 building. You start at midnight, you finish at 9 a.m. I was taking melatonin during the day so I could sleep during the day and work through the night. It is brutal. Shout out to news producers because they're doing the Lord's work, I'm telling you. I remember one time I left a girlfriend of mine at a bar alone because on my one night off, I was so exhausted. I slept through 2 alarms and she was just sitting there at the bar by herself. And when I eventually woke up, I was mortified. I was so embarrassed and I just felt terrible when I started crying. That was what this job had reduced me to. I was exhausted. And then when my hair started going grey, I thought, yeah, no, I've got to make a change here. So it wasn't sustainable at the end of the day. So after about a year, I decided it was time to move into reporting. After a year in that role, I landed the TV reporter job that I hold now. I wasn't willing to wait around, and I knew I was ready and hustled my ass off to get there. I remember consistently pitching ideas to the big boss at the time, everything from what kind of news rounds we could be doing to potential digital formats. And I don't even think it mattered how good my ideas were. It was the fact that I took the initiative to pitch them in the first place. Now, Every day I get to interview people. You get access to places as a reporter that you never would otherwise. And that's a privilege. It is a privilege to sit in front of someone, particularly a lot of the time in their most vulnerable state, and get to hear their stories every day. And I absolutely do not take that privilege for granted. The time between leaving my role as an executive assistant to landing my reporter job is under 2 years, proving you can make it happen very quickly if you are determined enough. I was never the perfect candidate, but I was the one who wanted it the most. The moves I made, they were intentional, at times ballsy, but I'm not the only one rewriting the rules. What used to look risky is now the new norm. And the truth is, the stigma around job hopping is fading, and the idea of a linear career path is pretty much dead. But let's zoom out for a second. This is where we get into the science part of the podcast. Generations like Gen Z and younger millennials are more likely to job hop and often see it as a way to advance their careers. Research shows, shout out Queensland Uni, that most people will change careers at least once, many as often as 3 to 7 times. I think I'm in that category personally. Millennials like me have copped flack for job hopping, but honestly, we just want more flexibility, more meaning in our work, more autonomy. And Gen Z, now they're taking it even further. They're digital natives. They're allergic to bullshit. They care more about purpose than pay. They won't bend to outdated industry pathways. And I don't think any of us should anymore. Boomers, however, so my parents, they were taught that stability equals success. And for some it worked, but that's not the only way. And that's the conversation I really want to open up. A lot of professionals I know have chosen to weave their transferable skills across different industries or roles, or like me, they spent their 20s just hustling, trial and error, figuring out who they were and what they wanted to do. Taking risks, shall we say. That is the time to take risks, is your 20s and 30s. I believe that weaving your skills across different roles builds confidence. Taking risks builds confidence, and in turn builds charisma. Some of you might be listening to this and thinking, yeah, that's all well and good for you, Jodie, but I'm a naturally shy person. I consider myself to be not particularly charismatic, and I'm fine with that. Well, that's absolutely fine, and I feel you on that, but I actually consider myself to be an introvert, truly. I spent a lot of time alone. I moved interstate by myself. I live alone. I need to recharge alone. I'm an introvert. It's just that my push to go after my goals is stronger than my fear. The fear that I have being on my deathbed, not having tried something, that scares me more than someone like you judging me or laughing at me. I would rather give something a go than die with regret. And I think everyone should feel that way. Like, it literally makes me emotional. Like, that's some real shit. Like, I truly believe that genuine charisma can be built by showing interest in others. Not phony interest. Like, people can smell when you're being inauthentic. If you want to build more charisma, it starts with confidence, but not the fake kind. I'm talking about being present, showing a real interest in people. Think about the people in your life that you love, that you hold close to you. Why is that? Think about it. It's probably because of the way they make you feel, right? They make you feel important and validated and special. If you can make other people feel that way, that is charisma, in my opinion. It's not about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being someone that others feel drawn to and feel safe around. That to me is Riz. I've done everything from stand-up comedy to C-suite EA work, and I've taken something from every experience. But let's be real, at every turn, it was my personality that opened the door. People don't want careers that box them in anymore. They want freedom to pivot, to explore, to back themselves. And employers, well, I really do think they're starting to catch on too. And if they're not, well, I'm sorry, honey, you're going to be left behind. So if you've ever felt like you don't tick all the boxes and just know intuitively that you're meant for more, this podcast is for you. If you're sitting at your desk thinking, you know what, I just can't do this anymore, this podcast is for you. You're in the right place. I'm Jodie Clarke, and you're listening to The Personality Hire, where Riz is the resume. Now, I want you to hit subscribe if you haven't already, send it to a mate, start chatting about it, get a conversation going. And let's just all start backing ourselves.